Generally for drawing purpose, we use HB pencil or 2B pencil. Alright. Very small piece of advice, never keep your pencils on the paper.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it may leave some spots on the paper and you may end up messing up your paper. Remember, these are shading pencils, so their impact is very dark, unlike your H pencils, which are the hard pencils. So even if you erase them, a little mark is always left on the paper. Okay? So generally for drawing we use HB or 2B. And these are all graphite shading pencils, which are slightly softer on the lead part. The main graphite pencils are very rough. They are mainly used for showing all kinds of rough textures, and they are mostly on the harder side. They are not so much on the smoother side or on the softer side. Okay. Now, with the HB is what we generally draw, and you all know how to draw light and dark, so I don't have to get into that aspect. Okay, because that was done for the kids. Now, so let's say if I am using HB. So this is the lightest I can get with HB. And this is the darkest I can get with HB. Okay? Lightest is almost not seen. With 2B, this is the lightest I can get. Okay, wait, let me write it over here. This is the lightest I can get with 2B. And this is the darkest I can get with 2B.
Ma'am, do we have to do that?
You will do this once I'm done with it. Okay? Then if I have to take 3B, all those who have 3B with you, you all can do this. With 3B, this is the lightest. And if you see, the gradation is also changing. That means the texture is changing. The smoothness is changing. Okay? And this is the darkest I can get with 3B. So this is HB. 2B, and this is 3B, lightest with 4B, and darkest with 4B. (6B). All those who have 5B can also add 5B in between.
I don't have both.
That's okay. And this is the darkest I get with 6B. And with 8B, it's very difficult to get lighter shade with a darker pencil. So this is the lightest I get with 8B. And this is the darkest I get with 8B. All those who have 10B will add on 10B to it. Okay?
Ma'am, my 10B is kept in the drawer. Shall I take it?
Yeah, you can take it. As I was saying 10B, so I wrote 10B over here. Okay, so you can see the difference in the lightness and also difference in the darkness. Also difference in the smoothness of it. From 3B, it starts taking a look of more like a grain kind of an effect. Whereas till HB, 2B, it is very smooth effect. Okay? So, while you are making any object, you need to know which pencil has to be used when, depending on the surface on which you will be working. Okay? That is very important. Okay? So, now let's understand the different shading techniques. Because once you know the different shading techniques, you know when to use which one. Because when you look at a particular object and you look at and you understand the surface of the object, because for the stony ones, for a little rough texture, for a smooth texture, you would first thing you would know is which kind of pencil you have to take. Second thing you will know is what kind of shading technique has to be used. So there are different shading techniques. One technique, if you all can help me by naming some of them. Stippling,
Cross-hatching.
Okay, cross hatching.
Hatching. Yeah, cross-hatching.
Mm-hmm.
Scumbling.
Scumbling. Okay. Let's begin with the basic one. Okay. Let's begin with the basic one. So I'm gonna use my 4B pencil. Okay. You all can try this with either all the pencils or with any pencil. Preferably 3B and above. Okay. Now the first technique is what I generally call it is smudging strokes. Smudging strokes are nothing but where you are doing strokes but they are very close to each other. Generally the method of holding we use for pencil is the under palm hold or a normal pencil hold.
Your drawing is not seen this anything.
I have not yet drawn anything.
Ma'am, the telling the strokes.
So smudging strokes are generally like this, where each strokes are from together. They are not like individual strokes. You don't see gaps between them. Okay? You have them very close to each other. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Wherein you don't need to actually use a smudging tool. You don't need your finger, you don't need a paper or a tissue or a smudging or a smudger or a stump like that. Okay? You can just with the help of your hold of your pencil, you get this effect. Right? So you can see the difference between the lines and this one. So this is the smudging stroke one, not this. These are called lines. Second one is the hatching. Okay? Hatching is small strokes. And remember one thing, hatchings and cross hatchings are mostly and always, almost 98% of the time are slant. Very, very, very rare time we see they are horizontal or vertically straight. Mostly they are diagonal or slant. Okay, because the diagonal and the slant is what brings the depth more. It brings more of the depth in a particular artwork. Okay, now the difference that you will see here from smudging is these are all lines and they always go in one direction, huh? Now, third one is your cross hatching.
The second one?
Hatching. Third one is your cross hatching. So you go, cross hatching is nothing but the hashtag sign. But the lines are not so far from each other. Like in a hashtag, you have lines so far, like a tic-tac-toe game. Okay, so here you have this, and then they are very close to each other. So the closeness is what creates the density of the shading. Okay. Now if you have to make it into a crisscross, you'll have to go one more line in a different direction. Okay. So if I'll just show you a small example over here for crisscross. So this becomes my cross hatching. Guys, give me 2 minutes. Can be done when we use paper. Okay, another small piece of advice, never use newspapers.
Okay, ma'am.
Never use newspapers because newspapers have got a black ink in them. And that black ink spreads on the paper when we are trying to smudge with the paper. Okay, so
Yes.
let me take the darker pencil. And let me shade here. I think 6B will be darker because I've got the lead more properly. Okay. Now I take this paper. I generally fold it because I like this part. Now you hold it with your index finger and you smoothen the surface. Now same way what we did with the eraser, we've got shade on our paper. If you want it to gradually spread, you can just use the paper and you can do it. The difference that you get in this from the dabbing technique of eraser is this shows the paper texture. So if you want the texture of the paper to be seen, the surface of the paper to be understood, you use a paper. You don't use the eraser at that time. Okay, but this will not make it as light as your eraser can make it. But if I want, I can again work on this and I can make it smudged all together. Now if in some place you want round, you go round. If you want straight, you go straight. Now sometimes I get a question that the paper is thick enough, how do we work on the sides? Always use this part of the paper, the folded part of the paper. Okay? Always use the folded part of the paper. And then with that, you just work on the sides. Make sure you hold the paper really tight and you just work on the sides. And your sides gets blended without disturbing the other areas. Understood? Till here? Okay, good. What happens? An object has got two kind of shapes, like two sides, and we have to show that, and yet we have to show that it is blending. Okay, I'll take a small flower petal and I will do it. So let me just draw it with HB. Okay, so now let's take 4B and 8B. Okay, now I will be shading this one and this one to show you the two different directions, so you will understand how to get that flow even for these two. Now this is my 4B. I start working with it, and you have to make sure that you go in the right direction. Now for this one, if you notice, I'm coming downwards. I'm not going like this because I want the petal to be seen that it is this side. Okay? And you have to keep changing your direction because this side you cannot shade in this way. Right? This side has to go in this direction and this will have to go in this direction. Now let's say I don't want to shade the other part, I just want to smudge it. So I often prefer using either a paper or my fingers, because I think that gives a better look to me. It gives a more naturalistic look than a smudger or something, because smudger makes it look very smooth. So if you're doing something very smooth kind of a texture, then maybe you can go with that. Okay, so I just spread this entire thing over here, and if you see, I'm going in the direction of the flower itself. Okay, and then maybe a little bit on this side, just to show that how my flower is turning. Basically not the flower, the petal. So basically by smudging with my finger, what it did, it gave me a base color or a base shade to the petal of my flower. Right? And also it helped me removing all the line edges. The dots or the line edges are missing, are not there. So now I again just smudge them.
Ma'am, you will send these all in the WhatsApp?
I will.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Now what I am going to do is I'm just going to use my 8B and I'm going to just darken the places where I want it to be darkened. If you notice, I'm going in the curved direction, I'm nowhere going straight like this, nor am I drawing lines like this. I'm holding my pencil here, I'm not even holding it here. I'm holding it here and I'm just going like this. So you see the difference between the two. This is very important for you all to understand, okay? Because this will not give me a natural look. This will give me a soft and a smooth look for a flower.
Yes, ma'am.
Now if I want, I can further smudge this so that my lines are not seen, leaving the dark to be there. Okay? Now for this side, it will be opposite. Here I will go in this direction. I'll go upwards. See, from the top I'm trying to make it little curved because I want that petal should appear like that. Another important thing, always make sure you keep a... Okay, always keep a rough paper with you because see, if I keep my hand over here, there are chances that it may get smudged with my hand and my page may become messy. So always keep a rough paper and keep your hand on it. So your already shaded portion is not messed up or it is not getting smudged further. Because if it gets more smudged, then we will end up getting a different look for that area completely. So I'm going to do the same thing what I did with the previous petal. I'm again going to smudge this so that I get a slight base color for my petal. In oil pastel, of course, you cannot use your fingers. You can, but you'll have to really press hard. So in oil pastels, we use paper, mostly, in order to spread that. Okay.
If we use tissue?
No, for oil pastel, I would not suggest tissue because tissue leaves its different mark. Tissue will leave its texture on it. So you use a plain paper. Tissues have got a completely different texture, so it leaves its mark. Just like newspaper, we don't prefer because it becomes darker. It leaves its own ink. Now it depends on how your petal is, where your petal has got dark effect, where it is light effect. Based on that, you use your 8B uses advised or suggested. Again, I'm going to just make use of the paper and I'm going to get my petal shape. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Now for the center one. So, in some of the flowers, we color the center first, in some we color later. If we want to show that this is up and petals are from behind, then we shade this later. But if we want to show that petals are on top of it, then we shade this first. Okay, it depends totally on how the object is appearing. For this, you go round. Because this is a round structure. And then just make use of your fingers and make it fully round. Because it's very easy to get round with your finger. Now take 8B and now if you see the technique that I'm using here is basically the smudging strokes technique, is the first technique that I'm mainly using here.
That looks like a bow.
That looks like a bow, yeah. Because it's two sides done. And I will also apply stippling technique over here. Just to bring out the pointy things that we have in our flower. I'm very bad with biological terms. So just to get that kind of an effect. Because I want to show that pointy things that, those small things that keeps coming out from the center from which each petal basically comes out. Okay. And now I'm going to use just hatching. Which basically adds more detail to my object. Alright? Understood? Yeah, it actually looks like a bow. So this becomes my cross hatching. And for a crisscross, I just again go over it in the third angle. Meaning 1, 2, and this is the third. But they are not so far. They are very close to each other. So it's mostly like your knitted kind of a look, wherein the baskets are knitted together, and you have your the woolen knit and everything. Okay. Okay. The fourth common one. So right now I'm telling you all the main common ones. Okay. The fourth common one is stippling. Yes, stippling is ... Now with this, so let's say if I draw a circle or a square, whatever, you just keep your pencil absolutely 90 degree. Okay. And you keep on going dots. Okay. Now the closeness of the dots and how far they are defines the shading in that particular object. If the dots are very close to each other, so obviously that portion will look darker than the area where your shading is far, where the dots are far off. Okay. So that helps you justify that where you want dark area, where you want light area. So if I go very close, and remember, you have to lift your hand every time. You cannot go together, because if you go together, it will form a line. That becomes rendering. That is very close to rendering technique. Okay, so every dot has to be done individually. Every dot is done individually.
What is it called?
Stippling. Stippling. So see, half, the bottom part I have done far, the upper part I have done little close. Okay, and to show that okay, that part is really has got too much of shading, you can keep on working on an area again and again and again. Okay, so these are the 4 basic techniques. The 5th one would be scribbling, which is the younger brother of scribbling. Scribbling is done like this. Yeah, scribbling is done like this, right? Scribbling is absolutely, it is small piece. So it just goes like this.
Can't see anything.
Yeah, because it is very lightly done. Now, what happens is, we go light. Now when we have to make it dark, we rework on it. We keep shading on it again and again and again. If it's very dark, then you apply more pressure and you make it dark. This is generally used for hedges, for bushes, for tree where you want to show too much of dark. Sometimes even where you just want to show random shading. In fact, there are complete artwork made with stippling, with hatching and with scumbling method.
Yeah.
Crisscrossing and stippling.
Crisscross is a part of cross hatching. Yeah.
When will we use stippling?
Those are used depending on where, so stippling is another form. See, it all depends on which kind of work you are doing. So there are times when I have done my complete work with stippling. So see, this is how you can create the light and dark. Okay?
How can I tell you what I've done?
Yes, please. These 5 are the basic shading techniques. Okay? And you have to understand by looking at the surface or whichever you become comfortable with, and we use the shading technique. Mostly which is used is the smudging, and the hatching is used too much. Scumbling is also used at times. Stippling is something that we generally people just work out on their complete artwork with stippling. Okay? Sometimes, especially when you're making rocks and all, stippling is applied over there.
Yeah, but you dip it in paint and you
See, these techniques are absolutely same whether you are working with pencil, whether you are working with oil pastels, color pencils, painting, anything. They all go same. The techniques don't change. Okay, the shading techniques remains the same. The blending techniques remains the same. Only the medium keeps changing. Alright? Okay. Now, your shading differs as your hold of pencil differs. Now, if I have a, let's say a small, I'm just making a small pyramid square. Now, if I'll just use 6B over here. Alright, so now let's understand the techniques of different way of holding. So what happens when we hold in different way, how the shading differs. Now this is the underpalm hold. Now in this, when you shade and when you're holding it very loose, it comes like this. And the moment you make it dark, it becomes like this.
Ma'am, which pencil?
I am using 6B right now. Okay?
Ma'am, should I copy all this?
No, not right now, later on. Okay? Now let's say if I have to get these corners marked. That time, obviously I'll go with the normal pencil hold technique. And
Yes, ma'am.
we just go in the smudging strokes. So generally for smudging strokes, we use the normal pencil hold. Okay? Now always remember, we never make a line like this for the outline corners and all. We always go in the shading way to get an outline. We kind of just blend the corners. We blend the borders. Because it's easy to always blend your corners.
To make it darker, ma'am.
To make it darker or to just get your borders correct.
Okay, ma'am.
2 things. One is to make it darker. Second is to make it broader. Like a proper border. See, if I go like this, like a line. Okay, and if I try to blend this doesn't blend. And if you guys also try out, and if you will try this, you will see your pencil will be getting stuck over here, because this makes a kind of a mark over here, which comes mostly on the back of on the back side of my page. Okay, but if I have done a line like this, which I did over here before, and then if I try to blend with this, it is easy. My pencil moves smoothly. Right? Now, let's say I make what a beautiful oval I have made. Okay? And these are the generally in the round kind of an object, you can always try and use the cross hatching technique. So what we do is, we start from here, let's say. I'm assuming that this part is my dark. I'm right now not going with the light source and all. Let us assume that this part is the darkest part. Okay, so I can always make it more gradient and make it more dark just by adding cross hatching to it. Because see, in cross hatching, what is happening? On a line, you are redoing a line. And since it's crossing each other, so the place wherever it is crossing, it's becoming darker. Right? Because even if you cross your fingers, so wherever the fingers will be crossing, that part will have the cast shadow of it. So it's a basic logical technique. It's a very simple thing. So it becomes darker. So see, if I shade here just with the hatching way. Let me use the 6B in full its strength. Okay, and I make cross hatching here. So which one appears to be more darker, the hatching or the cross hatching? Cross hatching. Yes. Cross hatching appears to be darker because it has got a double line crossover, because it's got like two lines, it's going like this, it's going like this. Okay. So these are the basic ways you need to know. Now sometimes when you want a double kind of a line, like a thicker line, okay, but in a shaded way, that time you don't go like this and then you don't shade underneath. No, what you do is you hold your pencil like this in the under palm position and you make a line here. Okay, now even if I have to make a single line, you get that shading effect automatically. Isn't it? But if I do this and then if I try to shade, I cannot get this effect. For this kind of an impact, I have to hold it in my under palm position and I have to go like this. So automatically where the lead was touching the most, that becomes darker, and then we have a gradual fading off in this part. Right? Understanding?
Yes.
Okay. Now, different it is. Okay, so let us understand how different it is when we shade, when we try to spread them. Okay, so you all can try this with a paper also and with your fingers. So if I try to smudge 2B, I'm going to use my index finger. Look at the smudging, how much it is happening for 2B, 3B, sorry, HB, this was HB, this is 2B, this is 3B, 4B, 6B, and then this is your 8B. So if you see, slowly even the smudging becomes darker. Now if I use my 8B with full darkness, okay, this is maximum that 8B can get. Okay, and if I keep on redoing on it, and then if I spread, it only gets smoother. Okay, and a slight darkness comes in this portion. That has happened for all. But if I try to spread the lighter ones, it actually doesn't spread much. It only becomes smooth where we had used the pencil. Nothing else happens. We can hardly see anything over here. But for these, it is easier. So remember, when you have to spread your shading, when you have to spread the colors that you've done, this also implies for colors, okay? You make sure that it is done on the darker, because it is the darker regions that will gradually spread and become lighter. Right? Because the lighter cannot become further light.
Yes.
Light you can't make further light. The best way to make light further light is to erase. Now, sometimes, so let's say I make a round here, okay, and I have really shaded over here dark. Now I want one part in this place to be light. And like, like really light, like there should not be any shading. Okay, that is the time you use your eraser. Try to use the pointed part of the eraser and not the blunt part. And if you don't have a pointed part, cut your eraser. Okay, maybe you can take help of your elders. For cutting and all, please. And you get the pointed part. Right? Now from one point, you start erasing in that place.
Yes, ma'am.
And you make sure that you concentrate in just that part. So you can see a spot which is like absolutely white in that. So generally the bounce light value that we have to show, we can often show it with this. Okay. Now if I would have done the same thing with the blunt side, let me show it to you what would have happened. Because let us understand that why we are not supposed to use the blunt side. Now in the blunt side, if I would have done, more or less everything gets erased. So if you have a very bigger region, where you need to bring that white effect, then maybe you can use the blunt side. But otherwise it is always advisable to use the pointed side. And if you don't have the pointed side, then of course go with it. Now if you want a very thin line, so the cut one, the part that I cut from my eraser, I can just use the thin portion of that and erase it. So this gives me a thinner line. Thinner you are able to cut, thinner you get. Okay? So these are few things that you should know. Now there is one more way, there is one more place where sometimes we don't want our shading to be erased, but we want in some portions it to be lighter. So let me go back to the page of the hatching one where we had done. Now let's say I want this part or this part to become slightly lighter, but I don't want it to be erased. Okay? That time we use a very simple word, and the technique has been named behind that simple word, that is called dabbing. Okay? It's called dabbing. I don't know whether it's a double B or a single B. So what you do, you don't erase. Okay? Make sure that your eraser is more or less clean. What you do, you just dab on top of it. You just dab. You just press it and you just dab. Just like stippling, instead of ta-ta-ta-ta-ta continuously, you're just going little. You're touching here, you're pressing. You're touching here, you're pressing. And if you want to spread it, your eraser has more or less become black in this part.
Yes, ma'am.
So you can just very lightly take your erasers, that darkness, and you can use it. So see, we did not erase, yet we got a light effect.